Yeah, I wanted to wait until you were here because I'm like, I gotta get Tiz hyped up for Queens of the Stone Age. And we got a few months, obviously, which is a good thing though because that gives me time to like plan it out. I literally said to Pat, shout out Packish, that I might actually like just buy 4 tickets, like if I can afford it. Obviously, depends on how much they are, but like I might just buy a few and just hope that I can convince the other people like to come with because I'm getting there no matter what. That's how I've established it to myself. It's my favorite band. There's no way I'm not seeing them when they just randomly added a show in our state. So I'm like, we definitely got to plan something for that. But we got a lot of plans coming up. But for now, though, let's talk some fights, man. Let's talk some fights. And it sucks because I feel like the Super Bowl overshadowed the fights this weekend, and that might be for a few reasons. One, just because I think everybody's pretty happy that the Chiefs lost. Well, except maybe Giants fans. But why are you not happy about that?
No. I think at first I was kind of hardcore Chiefs because just kind of as a Philly hater,
Fair enough.
more so that. But when it comes to the NFL, I mean, I don't have an issue with the Eagles.
Yeah, neither do I.
My friends were saying I look like Jalen Hurts yesterday, dude, and I was like, you know what? I will gladly take that.
I don't agree with that. I'm not gonna lie to you. I don't agree with that one. There's a few reasons, but I'm gonna be. I don't know if I agree with that one. I mean,
no, it's all right. You gotta do that. The analysis.
We might need to get you in the Jalen Hurts jersey.
All right, I'll
next podcast.
I'll try harder, and then we'll see what happens.
Yeah,
but
maybe like gain 4 or 5 inches in height, couple maybe like 60 pounds.
Yeah.
But yeah, man.
There's some work to do, and then win a Super Bowl MVP. You gotta do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you have to make it to the NFL first, which is gonna be tough considering
squat 600 pounds first too.
We'll get there.
Yeah,
we'll get there. We'll get there. Oh man. But all right, let's talk some fights, man.
Well, hold on, because
okay.
if you're talking about just for what are you talking about? Just for the card itself that the Super Bowl is overshadowing, or the whole week?
I'm more so meant like online. Like I'll say this. So to start it off, like for a casual audience, a lot of the times like I'll hear from casuals about UFC pay-per-views, right? But for this one, the people who I usually talk to about fights who like aren't really into it, but like talk to me about it, like to learn more. Even they were saying, like, I didn't really see anything about it on social media, whether it be the week before, the week of, and then even afterwards. Like, because some of them are like, oh, well, I usually see highlights on Twitter or Instagram, TikTok. Nothing, man. Like, nobody really... There was no big pay-per-view feel for this card, and that kind of sucks because I feel like the UFC usually does a great job at that. But for this one, it wasn't even like it sucked, you know what I mean? It was just painfully average. That's kind of the mindset I had the whole time I was watching. I'm like, this isn't terrible. Like, I'm not falling asleep here, but at the same time, I'm just like, I'm not really witnessing anything too special. And I kind of can get into that more with the main event, but if you want to like talk more about the card itself first, like I'll give you that.
Well, yeah, because I asked that because I throughout the week I wasn't getting that pay-per-view kind of vibe at all, really. I guess that could be for a few reasons, but I'm not entirely sure. If it's just me or that's just the general feeling that didn't really feel like too much of a pay-per-view, like other than there's 2 titles being defended, and it's not that this card was lacking in like star power. For instance, I mean, DDP is a star now. Sean Strickland's very popular. Zhang Weili's a star, and Tatiana Suarez is up and coming in the making. But just throughout the week, it's
I don't know what it just didn't feel
felt very flat, kind of.
Yeah, and it's not even like they weren't trying. I thought the fighters did a good job at selling this one, but it just seemed like outside of the main and co-main event, there weren't too many fights that a lot of people were hyped for. I mean, granted, the main and co-main, they weren't great fights, but they were decent fights in my opinion. I think the main event I have more criticism than I do the co-main. But like the UFC, we talk about it all the time, like with these numbered episodes that we do, and the reason why we have them numbered is because of the UFC numbered cards, obviously. and that's why we'll do these big Hurt Handbook podcasts. But this one, like, it just really didn't feel that way. But we learned a decent amount, and in my opinion at least, about all four of the fighters involved in the two title fights about it. I don't know if you want to like say anything more on the pay-per-view aspect of it before we get to the main event first though.
No, I think maybe just
any theories like what you think? Because we were talking about the Super Bowl before, but I mean that was kind of half joking just because, America hates the Chiefs magic.
Yeah, the last pay-per-view kind of already just happened, and Israel Adesanya was on the last card that wasn't even a pay-per-view either, so I guess that in a way was like, oh, when you're watching a legend like Izzy fight, then you're already psyched up for that in a way, even if it's just that one fight. Like when a guy who's only fought on pay-per-views is only fighting on a fight night, you still get that big fight feel. So this card luckily, obviously, it wasn't in the Apex. Otherwise, it really would have felt like just another fight night. We just had with two titles being defended. But, that's it. It just felt like that was important to say.
Well, let's hop into the main event here and talk about some of these fights. So, just in case people don't know, but Dricus du Plessis defended his title against Sean Strickland in the rematch. Oh my god, messed that one up. DDP defends the title against Sean Strickland definitively, wins by unanimous decision this time, a lot more clear cut than the first fight. 2 50-45s and then a 49-46, and defends the middleweight title for the second time now. And the reason why I said in the beginning that I have like more criticism for the main event than I do the co-main event is just because like it was almost like a lesser version of the first fight. Even statistically, I noticed both guys, their volume was way down, especially Strickland. Strickland's volume was almost cut in half, which I thought was crazy. Like, there's no world where you're going to regain a title against someone who beat you when you're throwing half as much. And even like with Sean Strickland, though, he didn't have that same urgency that he has in a lot of his fights, and he wasn't in DDP's face as much. And I think that could be a few reasons for that. I mean, he just didn't look as sharp. Usually Strickland's pretty sharp on the feet, but this time he was missing a lot more than he did in the last fight. But also, like, a lot of the times when Strickland's defending, he kind of, like, leans back. And it works for not getting hit, but, like, how much power are you really getting when you're throwing like this?
And shoulder rolls.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, like, you're not getting hit as much, sure, but there's no offense, and you have to have offense against a guy like DDP, who's basically just an athletic freak who also, it's weird, he fights so awkward, like technique-wise, he's not as bad as people think he is, but he also like isn't the most polished striker or grappler, but I think his athleticism kind of bails him out of it.
It's a dirty boxing kind of.
But the guy's a winner, though. Like, the way he just keeps winning fights, and you think that, like, oh, there's no way he's going to win this one or that one. But then, even without that crazy polished technique, he still finds ways to win, and he out-grits the other person a lot of the times. And especially in this fight, because it just seemed like Strickland he didn't dig as deep for this one. Like, yeah, he didn't get finished after breaking his nose and stuff, but there was, unlike the first fight, there were no moments in this one where I was really like, I think Strickland has a chance at this. I was disappointed in it. I really was. I thought this was going to be a good one, just like the first one was, but in my opinion, it kind of fell flat, really. That's just how I feel about the fight, but I don't know if you agree or disagree.
Well, to talk about the winner, at least, I think, at least with Dricus at this point, I mean, I think he just settled in and just kind of, even before he broke Strickland's nose, you did kind of already mention the fact that DDP was just one step ahead of Strickland the entire way. But once he broke his nose, I mean, he was going for the finish there and then kind of blew out his gas tank trying to do that. So that was really the only thing you could knock on DDP in this, what was otherwise like a flawless performance to defend his title. So
I'm not even hating on DDP, man. It's more so like because DDP won the first fight, right? So, in my opinion, sure he has to make adjustments, but not as many as Strickland has to make, considering he lost the last one. And Strickland, I thought he regressed, and then DDP had pretty much the same game plan he had in the first fight, except it was easier for him to execute because he kind of fine-tuned a few different things, and then also, like I said, Strickland's volume was cut pretty much in half in this fight. And you wonder too, because I don't know how much weight you put into this, but like he did have that mark on his arm, Sean Strickland, and I mean, it's not confirmed that it was staph, but it looked like staph. I don't know.
No, dude, haven't you heard he's immune? He doesn't
Yeah.
get injured.
I don't get staph, I give staph. That's a crazy answer, by the way. But yeah, man, I don't know. This fight just felt very flat, and I thought it was going to be better than it was. But DDP did exactly what he needed to do. So,
and it's interesting because Strickland was the champion at the time, last time these two fought. So, you'd kind of think that Dricus would be the one a lot more tenacious and on the front foot, perhaps, in that first fight. But I think at least to start that last fight, Strickland was the one who was really he was landing the ones and twos, the teeps, obviously his signature teeps, and he was defending and countering well. And I think really the only thing he was missing in terms of stuff he was throwing was the overhand rights. And if he connected with a lot of those, maybe even dropped Dricus here and there like once or twice, I think he easily wins that last fight. But it seemed like the roles are reversed now, where now Dricus is the champ and he's got that champion confidence and all that. And now having that last fight with Strickland under his belt and to watch back and kind of learn from and readjust, like you said, and fine tune. The roles are kind of reversed, where Strickland is trying to get busy, but he can't because Dricus is kind of just ready for everything he's going to throw. And
yeah, he just got neutralized, and it seemed like DDP didn't really have a lot of respect
DDP
for
didn't even really have
power.
to go for takedowns or nothing like that.
I mean, I don't remember how many he shot in the first fight, but he definitely shot quite a few. In this fight, I think the official stats, he was 1 for 1, and that one takedown, it wasn't really much anyway. So this fight was fought mainly on the feet, which is, I mean, you would think that would have favored Strickland, but like I said, he just did not look sharp at all in there, and you wonder why that was.
So now you take this fight and even his last fight against Paulo Costa that he won, and what I gather throughout all of those rounds combined is that we're kind of seeing a Strickland who's kind of on the downswing, I feel like, in my opinion, and someone who's kind of starting, even though he's he's in his 33, early 30s.
Yeah, he's not too old yet.
Really
33,
not
34.
too old, but seems like that signature dirty kind of boxing style. Even like for a brief moment in this fight that just happened, he kind of switched up his stance a little because he already got the unique kind of awkward stance, and he switched it up for like a brief minute where he looked like an actual regular just fighter, and then he went back to his signature stance. So something tells me that Sean, him and those guys at Extreme Couture, like, they're gonna look to kind of switch up kind of a style, I feel like, and maybe he's gonna push for takedowns a little more, and he's gonna maybe just switch up angles, level change, and not really like just come forward at you like we all know already with the teeps and the jabs, and he's going to really look to mix it up this time.
Well, they clearly saw what they did wrong in the first fight, if you remember like what was kind of going on in the corner, because Eric Nixick was like urging Sean Strickland to throw more, and it's just like, I need you to do this because it's just going to be the same as the first fight if you don't do this. And that's what I'm saying, like, it just ultimately falls more on Strickland, because like I said, DDP, he did what he needed to do. He won the first fight. There's no reason why he had to drastically change his game plan. He won the first time, and he didn't really change it. He simplified it, honestly, and he made adjustments to, I would say, emphasize the things that worked in the first fight, while Strickland had to go back to the drawing board and really think of something different. And it seemed like they did, because Eric Nixick was urging him to do more, but Strickland just wasn't sharp, and he just wasn't landing what he needed to land, and it seemed like DDP just didn't have a lot of respect for what Strickland was throwing at him. And, part of that could be because of the first fight. He's like, well, he hit me with his best. Yeah, he did damage, but he didn't finish me. But I would put it more on Strickland if you didn't like this fight more than DDP, because DDP defended the title. He did what he had to do. Strickland had to change it up more, and he didn't. So
the one thing I will say though, that I think will never go away about Sean Strickland is just the toughness and just
for sure
the dog deep down, the dog inside of him. It's not even deep there. He clearly shows the dog in him, and I mean, when you get your nose smashed like that, bro, and he's feeling it. Literally whenever I see somebody break their nose on, they feel it and they like understand that it's broken and stuff. I always just think back to like Rory when the second he felt it, thing. Like
he said the first jab of the fight versus Robbie Lawler, the second time he felt his nose break, and it's just like, it's so funny. Like, well, it's not funny, but you think about it from a fighter's perspective. You could do all these weeks of training and training camp, have this big game plan, and the first strike of the fight, you get injured somehow, whether it be you break your hand on a punch or you get your nose broken on the first shot you take, like, changes everything. Bad, it's crazy that the sport does that.
When you're not able to, you gotta exert even more energy breathing through your nose, and you're dealing with the pain, or breathing through your mouth and you're dealing with the pain of already a broken nose, and you got all this blood and sweat on your face and your eyes. And you're able to hang tough throughout a whole championship fight. It's just like hats off. It's like, you deserve to be on pay-per-view cards and just putting on a show in front of a huge crowd. So that's what I always love about Strickland. Obviously outside of all the stuff outside of that,
keeps people entertained, that's for sure. I mean, we can get into that another day,
but let's talk
about the champ. Let's talk about the champ. So I mean, this I think will be a relatively short conversation because I think the answer is pretty obvious. But what is next for Dricus du Plessis? I think the answer is obviously Khamzat Chimaev. I mean, middleweight has some emerging contenders like we talked about after the Saudi Arabia card. There's Imavov, there's Bohalio, but Khamzat just did what he did to Robert Whittaker. I think it's time to see him in a title fight, and I think him versus DDP, who's a guy who finds ways to win throughout all odds. I just would love to see this fight, and I think now's the time to make it, and it's obvious. DDP wants it. I think the UFC sees it as a fight that will sell, and I hope we get it sooner rather than later, and no dumb stuff gets in the way, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a scary thing when you just defend your title and you know who. It's kind of already one thing when you know who you're going to face next, but when it's someone like Khamzat, kind of like how much do you really celebrate this last win when you know the sooner you can get to training for this guy, the better.
DDP's a savage though. He seems like he wants this fight. Like, it's not like some fighters who you see who kind of try to do whatever they can to duck that clear number one contender. But I mean, DDP said after the fight, like, that's the fight that he wants, and he knows it's the fight that the UFC probably wants, so he wants to do it. And you gotta respect it. Like I said, the guy's a winner. He finds ways to win. I truly think he has an unshakable belief in himself. His confidence is unreal. Like, when you watch him during each fight week, I mean, he's undefeated in the UFC. So it's not like we really have any footage of this guy in the UFC octagon getting finished or getting beaten by anybody. I mean, he's had some closer fights, but still, I mean, this is an awesome matchup, and I think the UFC needs to make it as soon as possible. It just makes the most sense. It's not often when you have this clear of a title fight to be made, you know what I mean? I mean, I know DDP wants to also test the waters at 205 at some point, but right now there's contenders at middleweight, and I'd like to see him defend the title a few more times. And if he really wants to be the greatest middleweight, like he says, there's a few guys that he needs to beat first that are up and coming right now before he maybe goes up a weight class. That's just my opinion. And that's not even disrespect. Like, I'm just saying, it's not like he's cleaned out the division yet. There's still a lot of contenders to be faced even after Khamzat. So that's my viewpoint on it. But I don't know, man. You ready to move on to this co-main event?
Yeah, let's talk about another champ.
Yeah, this was
Zhang Weili.
I was super impressed with Zhang Weili's performance in this fight. And for those who didn't see it, Zhang Weili defies the odds, defends her title against the undefeated Tatiana Suarez, handing her first loss. Wei Li wins by unanimous decision, 249-46s and 149-45. And I don't know if you can maybe call it Zhang's most impressive win, because we've seen her have some insane performances before, and she's been in some insane wars, but this might be the most important win of her career. When you think about who she was fighting and the timing of it, we've talked about it on the podcast, and it's not like we're the only ones who have thought this. Tatiana Suarez seemed like a champion in waiting, and even now I would still say that she has potential to still win that title, maybe not from Zhang, but in the future. And I think that the fact that Zhang Weili came in against somebody who's probably more technical than her in every way on the ground and has a lifelong experience with competition. I think she's been wrestling since she was like 3 years old, which is mind-boggling. But yeah, I mean, the fact that Zhang Weili was able to do what she did to Tatiana Suarez, I was super impressed by it. She hung in there with the grappling way better than I expected. I mean, and it kind of went similar to how I figured it would have to go for Zhang to win, but I didn't think that it was going to go as well for Zhang as it did. I mean, I said to myself, Tatiana's going to get her in the clinch. That's going to happen. And I think the way that Zhang wins this fight, if she can't keep the space and win the fight on the feet, she's going to have to do stuff in the clinch on the breaks, elbows, knees, and she did a pretty good job of that. But the thing is, she also did a good job at avoiding the clinch, which I wasn't fully expecting. I won't lie to you. I thought that Zhang Weili was going to have to really fight to stop those takedowns and scramble back to her feet, but and it seemed like she just had control of every aspect of this fight, which I'm not sure anybody expected. And again, she just proves it again and again how good she is all around, whether it be the technique, the athleticism, fight IQ. I really thought all of those things shined in this fight. So that's just, I was super impressed. It may not have been the most entertaining fight of all time, but to me, I was super impressed considering the quality of competition that Zhang had.
I think this does hold a case for arguably her most impressive performance to date.
It's fair.
For one, it's the most recent one, so you're really only as good as your last fight. And to 49-46, a wrestler like Tatiana Suarez and somebody who is going to take you down at points and get you in the clinch, like you were just saying, the fact that Zhang Weili was able to take her down at points and still just give her a beating on the feet and with the strikes, that tells you really all you need to know about the champion we're watching at strawweight right now, and who we've been watching for the past, like, what now? It's been
it's like 5-6 years at this point. I mean, when you think about what was the fight with Joanna, the first fight, that crazy war, that was in 2020, because that was UFC 248. Remember Adesanya versus Romero? That was a fight.
Yeah, right.
Everybody remembers the co-main, but nobody remembers the main.
Yeah, right before the pandemic. Interesting.
Yeah, that was the last pay-per-view, I think, with fans for a while. But yeah, man, I mean, to get back to Zhang, though, I really thought in this fight, Zhang Weili's championship experience really showed against Tatiana, and I don't know if it was inactivity or just that, like I said, that lack of experience. It showed.
She made Suarez look desperate, really.
Well, she really was. I mean, Suarez's whole game is getting you to the ground, no matter what. And the thing is, in her career, she's never really had too much of a problem with that because her wrestling is so technical. The chains that she has, like the what's the word? Like the combinations in techniques that she has to get people to the ground, it's so technical and it's so unlike anything that a lot of these fighters have ever seen. And to see Zhang be able to deal with that as well as she did, that's why I was so impressed. And like I said, there were certain moments in this fight too where Suarez, you saw that inexperience. Like the first round, for example, she was doing really good in the first round, but then she went for that guillotine, which you were winning the round. You know what I mean? Take that victory and then fight the other four. You're going to have another opportunity for a finish. But instead, she goes for the guillotine. Then she ends up on her back and getting beat up for the rest of that round. And the fight really got away from her from that point on. So you wonder maybe what she would think when she rewatches that fight. Well, maybe if she doesn't go for that guillotine, how do things change? I don't know, man. I think that Zhang Weili, there's a lot of things that you could say about her that are positive that we've said about probably 1,000 times on this podcast. I mean, her boxing is technical. Her ground game, we really saw in this fight, is insanely good. She's an insane athlete. She's very strong. She's powerful. She's fast. And in this fight, she showed that she has really good fight IQ as well. And it's just, who beats this girl at strawweight? I thought if anybody, it was going to be Tatiana Suarez. I've said that on the podcast many times. And now that we've seen this fight and we saw how it went, I'm like, hey, man, at 115, these girls are going to have a rough time against this champion at this point. You know, that hiccup against Rose truly was that, a hiccup. Because ever since she's regained the title, it's only been upward.
Yeah, for sure. Tatiana Suarez tired herself out before. Honestly, looked like even before the third round, but especially after the third round. So
I do truly think that she believed she was going to get a finish. I don't blame her for being that confident. She was undefeated, and the way she's ran through that division to get to this point is impressive. But she just ran into somebody who was better, and it's going to happen sometimes. And she's a competitor. I feel like she'll be back at some point in this position, whether it be against Zhang or someone else. But I mean, she's going to have to improve, and I think she knows that. So it is what it is. But in terms of talking about the champion, Zhang Weili, what could be next for her? She's in an interesting spot because there are contenders at strawweight, but there are no real clear ones. The one that I wrote down is maybe the clearest would be Mackenzie Dern, but is there really an appetite for that fight? Especially after what we just saw against Tatiana Suarez, who's another person who's a ground specialist. Dern is also a ground specialist, just in a different way. So I don't know how differently this fight would go versus the one we just saw. But then there's rumblings that she could go up to 125 to fight Valentina Shevchenko. And that's a good fight, man. And the thing with Valentina is there's a few contenders for her. Like I wrote down here, Manon Fiorot, she's waiting for a title shot against Valentina. But right now, I don't know. I think you might have to make the Valentina versus Zhang fight. It might just be the super fight we need right now in women's MMA. I don't know what you think about all this. Because that's two divisions we're kind of grappling with here, you know?
I feel like why wait for the both of them to have even more fights, you know, accumulate even more damage, and then get older before when you see the two of them are clearly the best of the women's of just all women's MMA right now, and it's what Zhang wants. So, you know, there.
I think the fans want it too. Like, why wait? It just seems like both of those fights are unnecessary to do first, and they wouldn't sell as much because it's two dominant champions against two contenders who are good and have decent chances of winning. But at the same time, it's like, what would you rather see? Would you rather see them both have another fight in between, or would you rather see them go against each other at the moment where it just seems like we can time it right? And I personally want to see the super fight, but I also get it if people want to see them fight the contenders. You know, that's just how some people are, and it's fair. But this just seems like the fight to make right now, and I hope they make it because it would be a fun one. But yeah, man, outside of that, the card wasn't, like I said, it wasn't bad, wasn't great. Like the fight before this with Towson Teixeira, that was a crazy knockout against Justin Tafa. Jimmy Crute, he had a pretty good return, even though that was a majority draw. I thought it shouldn't have been a draw.
That's another thing that kind of hindered the pay-per-view experience, because how do you get such a ruthless fight like that one? Really well fought, hard fought by the both of them, and how anticlimactic it feels for it to end in a draw.
Yeah. Oh, to be fair, though, that's not the UFC's fault.
Well, yeah, I know,
you can't really
but
blame
it's
them for that.
Obviously we're talking about the card results and stuff. You know, obviously if all 5 of these fights were amazing wars or just crazy finishes throughout, then okay, yeah, that's what usually a pay-per-view feels like. But just for that fight to end on a draw, it kind of was like, well, that's like,
it really shouldn't have, though. I thought Crute won that fight.
Yeah, it shouldn't have anyways.
Yeah, I don't know. it just wasn't spectacular. The whole card, it just didn't have that feeling at really any point. It was just a good, half decent card. You know what I mean? And it's gonna happen. Not every pay-per-view is gonna be insane, but hopefully this was the last one like that for 2025. But hey, man, there was more news though outside of the UFC that I definitely want to get into from the past week, and the first of which is Canelo. I thought this was crazy. A little thing that happened over the course of like 4 or 5 days last week. Mm-hmm. So to start it off, what we know now, Canelo Alvarez signed a 4-fight deal with Turki Alalshikh and Riyadh Season in Saudi Arabia. And that's huge, obviously, because those guys over there have been making the biggest fights in boxing. And hopefully now that they have Canelo, we're going to get a few huge ones. Maybe Canelo Crawford. Not yet, though, because Canelo's first fight was already booked at May 3rd, which is not against Terence Crawford. But to kind of give people the summary, it seemed like there were two options from the jump. It was either the Saudis or Jake Paul. And while you could argue that Canelo definitely was using Jake Paul, both options were there for him. That part is true. And technically, if Canelo wanted to take a Jake Paul fight, that choice was there for him. But it seemed like at the end, that wasn't ever really an option for him. And Jake Paul kind of got played, which was funny. It's kind of funny. And but yeah, like they were both realistic options. They both were offering Canelo a lot of money, most likely. But Canelo's a very shrewd businessman. We've talked about this so many times before, and he's not dumb. The Saudis, they have basically an unlimited budget, and he knows that. So it's like, if I can keep this other option out there and make headlines with it, maybe I can get more money from this unlimited supply, pretty much. And then we get, in the middle of the week, news that Canelo versus Jake Paul is pretty much finalized. And you're like, wow, like, this is kind of crazy. I didn't post anything about it because you know how I feel with boxing announcements. Until we see some sort of promo for it, it's not really official. And good thing I didn't post about it, because that's exactly what happened. The fight falls through within hours of being finalized. And then Canelo immediately signs a 4-fight deal with Turki Alalshikh. And now it seems like we have some huge fights on the table there. And Jake Paul is throwing temper tantrums on social media, which is so fun to watch, man. I love watching it. And I have a hot take here. And maybe not a hot take, but it's just something that was on my mind like the whole time this has been happening over the past week. Jake Paul, right? From the beginning, he's constantly tried to act like this white knight in MMA and boxing who wants the best for all the fighters and is trying to bring eyes to the sport so everybody gets paid more money and the biggest stars get the glory they deserve. Well, he makes money in the process. He's never been shy about saying that. But he also had that other angle where it's like, I'm trying to help the sport. Now, in my opinion, trying to get a fight with Canelo, who's one of the greatest boxers of all time, when you know you haven't earned it, that's not for the good of the sport. And you can't have that angle, in my opinion, when you're trying to get a fight like Canelo, when there's other contenders who deserve to fight him way more. It's just, that's why I'm like, I'm happy that he's kind of on social media just basically bitching and moaning because he didn't get his way like a little kid. And I don't blame him. Like, he wants to make money. That's fair. Like, that's my problem with people hating on Jake Paul. They're like, oh, well, he shouldn't even be here. Like, if he's not half bad at boxing and he wants to make some money doing it, all the power to him. Like, this is America, right? So my whole thing, though, is just the whole for the good of the sport shtick that Jake Paul tries to keep pulling. This whole saga right here proves that that's BS, and it always has been. And I feel like we've kind of thought that since the jump, but I know my point from the beginning has just been like, yeah, he may not be genuine in what he's saying, but he is still bringing eyes to the sport, which deserves some credit. But this was just kind of hilarious to watch Canelo keep that option open solely to pretty much get more from the Saudis and then eventually sign with them, and then leaves Jake Paul basically humiliated, which is kind of funny. And even if it didn't go down like that, that's the way it looks, and that's the way fans are going to take it, whether Jake Paul likes it or not. So if you hate Jake Paul, this was a pretty fun week for you, you know? But hey, man, what did you get out of this whole saga over the past week with Canelo?
So, at first, it was the Terrence Crawford fight that started, like, it finally actually circulating, because us fans have been talking about it, how it should probably happen sooner rather than later. Then it wasn't until this week where it actually started getting talking about, picking up some steam, and then that gets replaced with Jake Paul, and then at that point it's like, okay, well, what's really going on here? Because there's no way this is actually finalized yet and official, so can't.
And
put
then in the
much
middle of
stock
that, they're
in.
talking about Canelo versus Crawford at T-Mobile Arena. If that was like in the middle of the whole Jake Paul thing, if you remember, like it was almost like a tit for tat type of deal. But when you hear a fight's getting finalized, and again, why would they announce that if that wasn't the case? And I think the other angle that I heard was that the Ring Magazine reported that Canelo wasn't going to be signing with the Saudis, which is basically gospel because Turki Alalshikh owns the Ring Magazine. So it's like if they're reporting it, it's true. And I don't know if that's what I'm saying. Like, I wonder how far along into the process Canelo made up his mind. Like, was it always going to be the Saudis, or was there a moment in time where maybe the Jake Paul fight was a realistic option? Me personally, I don't think so, but it's definitely possible. I just it's just funny to watch Jake Paul see firsthand, see how the boxing industry works, because that's one thing that he said that is 100% true. He's like, there's a lot of backstabbing, corrupt people in the boxing industry. I'm like, that's probably true.
Yeah, but I think he also sees, or he should see if he doesn't, because it's Jake Paul. He probably just take things in one year and out the other. But you should see that now that you are trying to move up to that next multiple freaking levels. I mean, you're trying to fight Canelo's here. So if you're trying to fight the best of the best now, and like you realize
he just
that
beat Mike Tyson. Oh Jesus!
fight of the year. Yeah, how could I forget?
Yeah. How could you? How could you?
Maybe he sees now that, hey, dude, you gotta actually earn it, and you gotta keep stacking wins, legit wins. You have to rack up if you want to fight someone like Canelo.
I know I've said it like 6 times. I've just loved the fallout of this, because Canelo was just like, yeah, I'm only fighting real fighters. That was always the plan. And Jake Paul's just like, he's an owned slave. He doesn't make any of his own decisions. He just wants the money. And he's like Canelo's not a real fighter. Like, he's just having like a panic attack, realizing that he just got humiliated. Oh man, you know what's funny? Like, I don't even hate Jake Paul. You know this. I have no like real problem with Jake Paul, but it is funny. It is funny to just watch how this is all unfolded, because I'm like, Canelo's boxing royalty, and to watch him just give Jake Paul a masterclass in the business of boxing was just unbelievable. Unbelievable. And I enjoyed watching it throughout the week. I didn't even post much about it on the Instagram, because I was like, what do I even say? There's just so many things.
You
That's
just
why
wait.
we gotta
Exactly.
wait.
You just wait and see. You schooled him. Jake Paul is
It was
still a
funny.
kid in a way when it comes to this stuff. So
He's a smart businessman, but in boxing, this is a whole different ball game, and he just found out the hard way.
yeah,
in this case.
bro, you better start racking up them wins over real boxers, Jake Paul, and not 60-year-olds, not.
You know what was funny? I swear too, like when they were announcing that the Canelo versus Paul fight was being finalized, this is obviously before it gets completely scrapped. I was thinking to myself, like, we have to cover this. Like, we have, because remember I even said to you off air at one point, like, unless Jake Paul fights Canelo, I'm done. Like, I can't cover this anymore.
He keeps,
and
dude,
then it got announced, and
this
I'm like,
guy,
you've got to
man.
be kidding me.
I know, dude. He's a viewer for sure.
That's what I'm saying. I do give him so much credit, because the dude knows how to get eyeballs on him, and that
Yeah.
deserves to be commended. But yeah, that was a fun little thing to keep an eye on over the last week, and it felt big enough to talk about, especially considering we only talked about the main and the co-main for the UFC pay-per-view. We wanted to give you guys another story to get through. But yeah, that's pretty much all we're going to cover on this episode. Next week, underrated middleweight scrap, even though it's an Apex card. Jared Cannonier versus RoboCop, Gregory Rodriguez. I'm excited for that fight. I don't know how you feel, but getting a lot of big middleweight fights lately, aren't we?
Yeah,
3 straight middleweight main events.
That's good.
I don't mind it. And then in a few weeks, it's Vittori versus Delice at middleweight too, I think. So yes, middleweight division's pretty active right now. I like it. We need that. We need active fight. Like you know, we've talked a lot. Divisions get into that stalemate when the top fighters aren't really putting their numbers on the line, and a lot of the fighters at middleweight this year and last year really have been doing that, and I respect it. So, but yeah, that's going to be a fun UFC main event, and we'll definitely be back next week to talk about that, most likely, unless something else crazy happens over the next week, which is, hey, we're in MMA. Anything is possible, dude. I've seen crazy shit. But, yeah, that'll most likely be what we're working on for the next podcast. And then outside of that, we've been working on a few things with the channel, you know, a couple of different video ideas, content ideas, and we got some cool stuff coming, I think, and you guys are definitely going to want to stay tuned for those announcements. I think right now we don't want to say much because it's like set, but we still have a couple of details to iron out for both of the things that I think we're going to be working on, but trust me, you guys aren't going to want to miss either of these things, so definitely stay tuned. You know, until then, see y'all next week.
Feel just like a superstar. Doing all these drugs, I don't think I'm gonna see tomorrow. Living fast, brand new dash up in a foreign car. It's the type of shit that you be doing when you going hard.